Welcome back. We're still live to you from the nation's capital, Abuja, where the World Pension Summit Africa Special is happening, boasting quite a number of interesting. It's been a very interesting start of, particularly listening to all the speeches and addresses from the Director General of PENCOM to listening to former President Chief Olusegun Obasanjo.
Yeah, President Obasanjo actually, of course, is something to his credit, one of the key market and economic development in Nigeria, and I think it's something is the hallmark of his administration from economic financial markets point of view. I think everybody will agree. This was a country of perhaps that time about 100 million people, what we had at the pension market, and I'm sure our guests here in the studio here will speak to that a little bit more, taking us a little bit back, giving us some historical perspective of where the market was before President Obasanjo started the pension market reform. It was thought that it wasn't going to work. It worked. It became a dynamo, as it were, that today you have millions of Nigeria within the market. You're looking at the size of the pension market in Nigeria, almost the size of 2016 budget, almost 6 trillion heading to that figure. That's quite huge. And if you look at what the various transformations as far as the operators is concerned, as far as the regulations is concerned, with the amendments to the Act of last year, or after 10 years, I think that was all about what President Obasanjo spoke about, and he's quite a big figure here. He is the father of the pension, of modern day, or private sector pension industry in Nigeria, and I think he's going to hold that for life, as it were.
Yeah, because it's a very dynamic industry, like you rightly pointed out, on a global scale. It's something that has seen a very tremendous growth. Here in Nigeria, we have it at over 5 trillion naira, and just a little under about 70 million or thereabouts who actually have any form of pensions.
If you look at the inclusion and how we need to expand the pension industry in Nigeria, you think and I'm sure Lunga will speak to that, it's still a long way. You have 160 million people you need to reach. So perhaps the size of that market is more than 10 trillion, perhaps it's about 15 trillion.
Okay.
At a point in which even the pension will be bigger than the national budget, as it were. And I think there's a lot of room. Maybe we should just let Lunga speak to some of this.
So you've actually let the cat out of the bag, and we've been joined now by the chairman, Pension Operators Association of Nigeria, Mr. Egwaide Longe. Thank you so much, Egwaide, for joining us on the program. So it's a very fine start off, to this very interesting program that's going to last for the next 2 days. Give us a historical perspective. Bosun already, started talking about it. Historically speaking, how would you rate the pensions industry, taking a look at how dynamic it's supposed to be?
I think that Nigeria has set the pace for many parts of the world. Contributory pension is where the world is going now. And there are a few countries and a few regions in the world that this has started off in, particularly in South America, Chile, which the Nigerian system is borrowed from. But we have, as we always do in Nigeria, we've taken it and we've done something very beautiful with it. And we have all the progenitors of that scheme with us today. We have Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, as you spoke about, and we have Malam Nasser El-Rufai. The industry as we have it today was originated from the fact that when Malam Nasser El-Rufai was in charge of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, he found out that most of the Nigerian corporations had serious pension liabilities that they couldn't cover. And he'd spoken to his boss at the time, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, to say, how do we sort these problems out? That is the origin of the pension scheme we have today. Yes, there's a lot more between that time and now. There's Fola Adiola, the Fola Adiola committee that set this off, and the current Director General. So there's been a long history. But in a word, I think that what we have today is a revolution when you compare it to what there was before. It's an absolute revolution. I mean, think about the people they say had to wait on queues. We've had films about people dying, and all you hear most times on the news is about pension fraud. But there are two different systems. We try to make that point. I don't think we've made a great success of letting people know that there are two systems, the old and the new. The old is dying away, and we expect that over the next maybe 5 to 10 years, the old will have passed away, in a manner of speaking, and the new would have taken over completely.
But then you see, even though you're hoping that the new takes over completely, there definitely must be challenges that industry operators face. Could you just tell us some of those challenges?
There are several challenges. I mean, and one of the biggest challenges we face today, challenges that actually have their roots in the old scheme. It has been a bit challenging for governments to meet its obligations from the old scheme. And I just take a step back. There is what is called a retirement benefit redemption bond fund, which arose because the pension system in the past had a promise to the civil servants, the federal civil servants. And since there were liabilities that government could not pay at the time when they cut over to the new system, a bond fund was created such that when a person retires who had a part of the old scheme, the government will pay him what he was owed from the old scheme, which we call in the industry accrued rights. It's been a bit of a challenge for government to meet up with that, with the accrued right payments. I mean, and this has started from the end of 2014, beginning of 2015, and you'd recognize that it was at that time that we had the slump in the oil market. So the government has found it a bit difficult to meet the obligations as far as that is concerned, but it is front burner for them, and all efforts are being made to ensure that they meet up. Before that time, it was seamless, and this really is only for public sector employees.
If I may speak to that, again, the privatization exercise back there with the BPE, where El-Rufai was now the governor of Kaduna State, was the opening league for that with the privatization exercise under the President Obasanjo's administration back then. And that's what opened up actually the challenges that how to disengage the civil servants or the workers in those organizations. And since then, we've seen a number of other privatizations, all till the last administration in 2015 with the power sector. So we've done a number of that. So that's where the accrue and the issues were coming from. What are the things that we've discovered? Till date, civil servants still queue for some of their pensions. And some of the stories we're still seeing in this was not as bad as they were 30, 40 years ago. But then, are there areas in which you pension operators see the government funding these liabilities and the ease with which the civil servants who had money already in there get paid?
Well, I think it is important once again to make the point that we're dealing with two different pension schemes. The civil servants who find it a challenge getting their pensions belong to the defined benefit scheme of old. What we run is a contributory pension scheme. We're really not involved with the defined benefit scheme. And if you read the news yesterday, the government just appointed a Director General for the Pension Transition Arrangement Department. I think it's Dr. Ikiazo. So they are in charge of the old scheme. And that's where you have all those who were owed pension under the defined benefit scheme who needed to be paid. Now, the challenge of the old scheme was record keeping. There wasn't proper registration. Money wasn't set aside diligently to make those payments. So they needed constantly to verify that pensioners were alive. So you then had to have people line up to be sure that they're the ones who own the pension. Now, in this new scheme, from the beginning, your pension is personalized. You have a retirement savings account.
Like a bank account.
Exactly, which you register for. And the system is such that there is division of responsibility. We have an overarching regulator, which never was before, which is PENCOM, and they've done an excellent job. The World Pension Summit is a factor of the doggedness of PENCOM to take pension to yet another level. And then you have the custodians who actually keep the money. And then you have the pension fund administrators who invest the money professionally. So, and we hear this story about money being idle. Not 1 naira of that money is idle. So where
1 naira out of the 5 trillion.
Not 1 naira of that 5 trillion is idle. It's all invested, and much of the money is invested with government. So when we talk about infrastructure, which I know is coming up,
yeah, I'm sure I'm more keen about.
Can government please utilize
so there's
the
no
money?
idle money.
No.
So we get this clear.
Yes.
So there's no idle money.
No.
So in the news, I'm sure, Harriet, isn't it? People say, look, can we grab some of this 5 trillion and invest it in infrastructure? Now you're saying there's no one piece of naira idling elsewhere. There's no free money anywhere. There's no money for anybody to tap into.
It's not. There's none. But you see, I think it's also important to make the point that we have about 70% of that money invested in government securities, federal government bonds and treasury bills. Now, I think that's where people get excited. Why are you putting the money with government? Why don't you use it to do something innovative? Roads, bridges, water plants, railways, seaports. But you see, the money that is invested with government is actually supposed to deliver those social assets. But if government has borrowed money from the institutional investors and used it for recurrent expenditure, can you blame the pension system for that? I don't think so. I think that what you then need to do is have a conversation with government to say, how do we move forward? If we are going to utilize pension money as a catalyst, we must utilize pension money in the right way. I mean, we must think out the projects we want to get into in such a way that it is regenerative. That's what is important.
Okay, so sorry to jump in here, but what about for individuals who, for instance, want to put this money into something else entirely, maybe not infrastructure? What if, for instance, they want to put it into education? Because they are not earning salaries as regularly. And as you rightly pointed out, there's been some discrepancies between the old and the new. Yeah. But some of those people in the old have children in school and they like to pay their tuition fees, then what?
That's not what pension is for. Pension is savings against retirement for savings against old age security. That's what pension is for. I think you use your recurrent expenditure to take care of your child's education.
But I'm sure you've actually had cases where people would come and insist they want to access that particular fund because they've had particular needs. So how have you dealt with such cases?
We tell them what I just said to you. I mean, pension, the act is very clear. I mean, you're supposed to put this money aside for old age. I mean, and what really, how does it work? It's 18% of what is described as the total emolument, which in some cases is calculated as basic housing and transport. 8% minimum from the employee's pay, and 10% is added by the employer. So you have, if you take 8% of the employee's pay, you have 92% to take care of education and take care of all the other needs. So I think, I don't want to say that, but I think it's just poor financial planning sometimes. And we must be realistic. Salaries are not very high in this part of the world. We're struggling all the time to stretch to meet our obligations. That's the more reason why if you put money away, you should let it be put away and invested profitably so that at the time when you can't work anymore, you have some kind of subvention to take you on.
Thank you for clearing that up.
Very quickly, we need to wrap up this part of the conversation, and we thank you very much. But in terms of some folks, some Nigerians, ordinary people are beginning to think that pensions schemes are becoming like insurance. Well, very cheerful taker, but reluctant giver. In other words, you have the wife or the husband of the deceased spouse in the family, for example, and as soon as either of them pass away, it becomes difficult to access the pensions. Does it have to do with the initial individual that started the pension account? Does it have to do with the information provided in terms of who's the next of kin, who's going to be the beneficiary at what point in time? So that folks don't start thinking that, look, I need just my money now, because if you give to insurance, they're going to keep giving you stories when it is time to pay up. Pension ought not to be so, because at the time the family of a deceased individual would need the money is at a very crucial point of both emotional and perhaps financial distress.
I think that the pension system realizes this. I mean, and a lot of things have been done to try and cure this. I mean, and a lot of it is education as well. But it all comes down to the inheritance system and the pattern by which a beneficiary can access his benefactors, what the benefactor has passed down to them. You have to have a will, and we tell most of our contributors it's important for you to have a will. And I think that there's some of our members in the association, the Pension Fund Operators Association of Nigeria, who provide that as a value-added services, not charged for mostly, so that people realize that they have to write a will. Because if you don't write a will, it becomes more difficult. But I'll give you what else has been thought about in the pension system. It's included in the regulation and in the new law of 2014. You're supposed to write your next of kin. You're supposed to write your next of kin in your form, and the beneficiary that will get what you are supposed to get as group life insurance. Because in addition to putting money aside for pension, there has to be 3 times your total emoluments put aside by your employer for insurance, as group life insurance. If a person dies in service, they're supposed to get that benefit. What they've done with the new law now is that the beneficiary gets the money directly. It's not paid into his retirement savings account. You get that money directly so that you can get back on your feet while you're processing the broader benefits.
So there's a form, if you don't have your will, for instance, that specifies that this particular person is a beneficiary.
Just the group life.
Just the group life.
Just the group life insurance. But for the broader pension, you have to go through the inheritance process.
Very interesting conversation. Well, thank you very much for coming on the program. I'm sure we'll have the next 2 days to share together and learn from your experience. Will you be speaking at some point?
I don't think so.
You're the chairman of the operators in Nigeria.
Well, you see, there are lots of chairmen here internationally, but we will all enjoy the rich experience.
I think we're having one of them next, Harriet, isn't it?
Yes, we are. But thank you so much, Mr. Longe Gwaide, for coming on the program and joining us, and of course, sharing perspectives on what's going on in the industry.
Thank you very much.